Today on The World Today. At least 27 people fared dead in Japanese building fire. At least 12 people dead and villages destroyed as Typhoon Rai batters the Philippines. Plus, Australia mourns children killed in bouncy castle accident as police conduct investigations. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shuboale. We begin in Japan, where at least 27 people are found dead after a fire broke out in a building in downtown Osaka. Police are investigating whether the blaze was started deliberately. All of those found dead were reportedly in a psychiatric clinic on the 4th floor of the building, located in a busy commercial and entertainment district. According to reports, a man who appeared to be in his 50s or 60s was seen carrying a bag of liquid into the building before knocking it over near a heater, spilling the liquid and starting the fire. Over in the Philippines, at least 12 people have died in the strongest typhoon to hit the country this year. Officials say a popular tourist island is among areas left devastated. The tropical storm has leveled homes on islands along its path, displacing hundreds of thousands of people.
This is the aftermath of Typhoon Rai, one of the most powerful tropical storms to hit the Philippines this year. Video released by officials show parts of the popular holiday island of Siargao, one of the areas where Rai first made landfall as a Category 5 typhoon, inundated with floods and damaged structures. Typhoon Rai, which saw winds of up to 195 kilometers per hour before hitting land on Thursday, has damaged houses and displaced more than 300,000 people. It has also toppled power and communication lines. The United Nations says some 13 million people may be affected. So far, 12 people are confirmed to have died. Footage shared by the Philippine Coast Guard show residents in Cagayan de Oro City in the southern region being evacuated using makeshift floaters from their homes after heavy rains caused by the typhoon flooded low-lying areas. Disaster officials are assessing the extent of damages caused. Typhoon Rai has now been downgraded to a Category 2 storm and is expected to move out of the country by Saturday. The Philippines, ranked as one of the world's most vulnerable countries to the effects of climate change, is hit by an average of 20 storms and typhoons every year, which typically wipes out harvests, homes and infrastructure in the already impoverished areas. The deadliest cyclone on record in the Philippines was Super Typhoon Haiyan, which left more than 7,300 people dead or missing in 2013.
Flash floods in northern Iraq have killed at least 8 people, with 3 others missing. Heavy rain caused the floods in remote areas south of the city of Erbil. Flooding and intense storms often hit parts of Iraq during the winter, especially in the north, but are rarely so deadly. Several people were killed and thousands fled their homes in flash floods in northern Iraq in 2018. Large parts of Iraq's infrastructure remain decimated by decades of war and sanctions under former ruler Saddam Hussein and since the U.S. invasion of 2003, which unleashed civil war. In Australia, police say investigations are continuing over the death of 5 children after a bouncy castle was lifted into the air from strong winds at a primary school's end-of-the-year celebrations. 3 boys and 1 girl aged 12 years and 1 girl aged 11 died. Another 3 children remain in the hospital.
I can say that police understand there were close to 40 Year 5 and 6 students taking part in the end of term activities when this incident occurred. Several adults were also in attendance when the inflatable equipment lifted into the air, and they rendered first aid until emergency services arrived. 9 children were seriously injured. Tragically, 5 of those children have died, 3 boys and 2 girls. 1 was 11 years old, 4 were 12 years old. 3 remain in a critical condition at the Royal Hobart Hospital. 1 is now recovering from home.
Today the Tasmanian community continues to grieve for the 5 children who sadly lost their lives yesterday. We also continue to hope and pray for the 4 children who remain in hospital that they'll be able to recover. The tragedy which occurred yesterday is beyond comprehension. It's devastating, heartbreaking, it's just simply incomprehensible. What should have been a celebration for the end of the school year turned into an unfortunate tragedy for our young children at Hillcrest Primary. Overnight there's been an enormous outpouring of grief as well as support for those involved here in Devonport, across Tasmania, across the country and indeed across the world.
Meanwhile, flowers, toys and candles have been left at a makeshift memorial set up outside the Australian primary school. A candlelight vigil has been held outside the school, while some residents have turned off their Christmas lights as a sign of respect.
My whole heart just sunk and got cold shivers through my body, and it's just so sad to hear.
Absolutely heartbreaking. I just feel for everybody involved.
It's going to be one of the toughest times we've faced, and there's no getting around that.
Again, I just want to extend, on behalf of the government and Jenny and I, our deepest sympathies to all the families and all the community in Devonport for this horrific tragedy that has occurred with the loss of 5 young, precious lives and more that hang in the balance. I want to thank all the first responders. You know, our first responders each and every day are trained to deal with some of the most unimaginable things. But on this occasion, I think it goes well beyond what even they could have imagined and the scene that was on the ground.
To British politics, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's party has lost control of a previously safe parliamentary seat in a surprise election result. The centrist Liberal Democrat Party candidate Helen Morgan won the North Shropshire seat by a majority of nearly 6,000 votes, overturning a 23,000 vote Conservative majority from 2019. The Conservatives had won every previous election for the mostly rural area of central England ever since the constituency was created in its current form in 1983. The huge swing in local opinion comes at a time when Prime Minister Johnson is facing criticism on several fronts, including over reports that his staff held parties last Christmas when the country was in lockdown.
Tonight, the people of North Shropshire have spoken on behalf of the British people. They've said loudly and clearly, Boris Johnson.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he's disappointed following the huge by-election defeat. He says a constant litany of stuff about politics and politicians and the media is to blame, but he says he takes personal responsibility for the defeat.
Clearly, the vote in North Shropshire is a very disappointing result, and I totally understand people's frustrations. I hear what the voters are saying in North Shropshire, and in all humility, I've got to accept that verdict. Yes, Sam, and what I would say is, of course, I understand that what voters want us as the government to be doing at all times is to focus on them and on their priorities. And my job as Prime Minister is to get the focus onto the stuff that really matters to all of us.
Tokunbo Olorodami, political strategist and a lecturer at the Oxford Brookes University, joins us now for more on this. Thank you so much for your time on The World Today.
Thank you, Taniola, for having me.
So this is one of the biggest upsets in recent British electoral history. How did the Conservatives lose one of their safest seats to the Liberal Democrats?
It's been described as a calamitous collapse of the Conservative network in elections, and it's a history of almost over 200 years. So you're right to say it's safe. But when you look at the public display of disrespect for order and misbehavior by ministers one after the other, it leaves much to be desired. And considering that this particular area is one of the strongest bases for the Brexit campaign, and they voted for Brexit, someone who is a political party that is pro-Europe has won an election and unseated them the first time ever is shocking, I must say. It leaves much to be deserved by the Conservative Party, really.
You know, the handling of the COVID pandemic and then, you know, the Christmas party that everyone is talking about, it seems it's all catching up with the Prime Minister, isn't it? How do you see all this playing out for him? Will he be able to hold on to power?
You can, as you rightly heard Helen Morgan saying, the party's over. You know, while Britain was locked down and people were asked to behave in a certain way, we have people in the Prime Minister's office allegedly holding parties and doing other things they shouldn't have. The Health Minister himself was caught, interacting with somebody he shouldn't be at that time. So there's a lot of backlash from all of that. So this is one of the results. And I hope that they get their acts together, because even right now, there's a Conservative kickback, even within the party, about the current lockdown. So there's a lot that has to be put together to galvanize the force of the party, put the people together, and relaunch themselves into public domain, because they are losing popularity by the minute.
All right, then, Mr. Tokunbo Olorundami, we'll have to see how it all plays out for the Prime Minister and his party. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Thank you for having me.
And now to Brexit. The EU Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic is urging Britain to mirror EU efforts to resolve post-Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland after the bloc proposed legal changes to ease the transport of medicines to the province. The two sides have been in intensive talks to resolve difficulties over trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which has a land border with European Union member, the Republic of Ireland.
I stood here 1 year ago to the day, welcoming solutions which would ensure that the protocol became operational in time. Today is a further demonstration of the EU's unwavering commitment to stability and predictability for citizens and businesses in Northern Ireland. And I urge the UK government to reciprocate our efforts, because the European Court of Justice is there to remove the barriers, to make a single market operating smoothly, to make sure that the rules are applied in the same way, and therefore it's part and parcel of the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland. So therefore it's part of the overall deal we had with the UK. It was not disputed at all until the summer of this year, and therefore for us this is the topic we are not ready to include in our discussions.
Some updates on the COVID-19 pandemic now. South Africa says vaccines and previous infections could be why the Omicron variant cases appear milder. Plus, Germany's health minister says he expects a massive fifth coronavirus wave in the country. Here's the global update.
South Africa's health minister says the government believes that vaccines and high levels of prior COVID-19 infections are helping to keep the disease milder in a wave driven by the Omicron variant. There have been early anecdotal accounts suggesting that Omicron is causing less severe illness than previous variants in South Africa. but scientists say it is too early to draw firm conclusions. The country reported a record number of daily infections earlier this week.
So we believe that it might not necessarily just be that Omicron is less virulent, but we believe that this coverage of immunization, of vaccination, but also in addition, natural immunity of people who have already had contact with the virus is also adding to the protection. That's why we're seeing mild illness.
Over in Germany, the health minister says he expects the Omicron variant of the coronavirus to unleash a massive fifth wave of the pandemic. He says Germany has to prepare for a challenge officials have never seen in this form before. It comes as the country reported an increase in the number of Omicron infections, according to a weekly report from the country's National Disease and Control Center. Officials say pressure on French hospitals has been steadily mounting over the past weeks as France battles a fifth wave of COVID-19 infections, which has been filling up ICUs with unvaccinated patients. France recorded 60,866 new cases over the past 24 hours. The government had said earlier in the week that it expects to see around 4,000 patients in intensive care with COVID-19 by the Christmas holidays. Australia's New South Wales has set another daily record of 2,313 COVID-19 cases as infections surge across the state. The state has broken its own record for news for the second day in a row, with infections jumping from Thursday's total of 1,742. A raft of restrictions have been eased across the state this week. Masks are now only required on public transport, at airports, planes, and for unvaccinated indoor hospitality staff. And finally, Russian President Vladimir Putin says the country's Sputnik 5 coronavirus vaccine is effective against the Omicron variant. He says data shows the vaccine induces a robust neutralizing antibody response to the Omicron variant, which is further strengthened by the Sputnik-like booster. Sputnik 5 is one of Russia's 4 domestically approved COVID-19 vaccines.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is calling on all countries to work in a coordinated way to defeat COVID-19. He made his appeal during his end-of-year press stakeout when he addressed the deficits in the governance of both pandemic and international financial systems. He says that the world cannot defeat a pandemic in an uncoordinated way.
The strategy of vaccine hoarding, the strategy of vaccine nationalism, or the strategy of vaccine diplomacy have failed. This new variant has demonstrated this failure. And so my hope is that countries understand that from now on, we need to have an equitable way to address the pandemic, or we will all be victims of it.
The United Nations Human Rights Council has ordered an international investigation into abuses carried out during the conflict in Ethiopia. The European Union had called for a special sit-in of the Council in Geneva after rights groups said violations committed during more than a year of conflict might amount to war crimes. Ethiopia has dismissed the move as politically motivated. The UN Rights Council again warned that all sides in the civil war were committing severe violations. The UN Refugee Agency says clashes between herders, fishermen and farmers in the far north of Cameroon have driven at least 100,000 people from their homes in the past 2 weeks, creating a humanitarian emergency. The UNHCR estimates that more than 85,000 people had fled into neighboring Chad in recent days, while at least 15,000 people had been forced to seek shelter within Cameroon. 44 people have been killed in the fighting and 111 injured. Chad is home to nearly 1 million refugees and internally displaced people.
Questa preghiera al quale facciamo oggi tanti auguri di buon compleanno.
An applause rang out at the Vatican earlier today as Pope Francis stood to acknowledge a round of clapping in a sign of respect as he reached the age of 85. The Pope always likes to celebrate his birthday in a discreet manner with a work-as-usual mentality. During the morning, the pontiff welcomed the first group of migrants from Cyprus that have been brought to Italy following an initiative by Pope Francis to assist in their relocation. Pope Francis visited Cyprus in early December. He pledged to arrange the transfer of 50 migrants to Italy. Well, as a birthday gift, the migrants presented the Pope with a painting by an Afghan refugee showing migrants landing on a beach in Lesbos. Well, as you can see at night, streets of Colombia's capital look like a scene out of a Christmas movie, all thanks to a new Christmas train decked with multicolored lights. The train's manager, Andres Rodriguez, says that besides being a publicity event, the attraction also helps bring joy to the people of Bogota. Staff dressed up as train conductors, nutcrackers, and Santa Claus will also greet the passengers at the train station. The Christmas train will be operating all through December. Last year, the traditional Christmas tour was cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
¡Feliz Navidad! ¡Gracias! ¿Listo? Bueno. ¿Salimos todos? Regalos para todos. Toda la familia, un hermoso regalo. Muchas gracias. Bueno.
Oh, that's definitely a fun way to get around town. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Bye for now.